we have with us Professor Sanjeev Singh. He is currently a professor at Architecture Department of Architecture School and Planning, Bhopal, an architecture graduate from Government College of Architecture, which is now called as Faculty of Architecture, AKTU. He completed his Master's in Environmental Studies from Melbourne University and PhD from National University of Singapore. He has been the recipient AU SAID Scholarship and Postgraduate Research Scholarship, National University of Singapore, for his Master's and PhD studies. He has a teaching and practice experience of more than 30 years. His research interests are in the field of vernacular architecture, cultural landscapes, and environmental studies. He has been conducting vernacular studio at SPA Bhopal since past 12 years and has publications at national and international levels that refer to his interest areas. Presently, he is also holding the position of Dean Planning Development at SPA Bhopal. He has been on various committees of number of national institutes in the capacity of expert member. Now I request Professor Sanjeev sir to join us for the session and share his knowledge with the participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gunjan. Give me a minute. Okay. Okay, so I would like to thank once again to Anand and Vivek who gave me this opportunity, and thank you, Gunjan, for my brief introduction. I have been in academia for nearly 30 years, and my passion for vernacular is immense, and I have been working in this field for last around 15 years. And as Gunjan told that I have been conducting vernacular studios in SPA Bhopal since past 12 years. So what I have seen while listening to the speakers before me, what I was seeing that most of the time we were talking about vernacular which exists in our urban areas. We were not talking about vernacular that exists in our rural areas, or I say this more than 60% of our population where they live, how they live. There was also some discussion on the musifying vernacular and then preserving vernacular. And then there was some discussion about relevance of vernacular, and there was some discussion about students, how to engage students in vernacular. So my effort in this past 15 years has been to engage my students in vernacular, and that also not everyday vernacular, but vernacular that exists in true sense in our more than 60% of population. And why my passion is there for vernacular is that vernacular is not just about the built form. Vernacular is in its entirety, if you look at the phenomenology of vernacular, the sense of place that vernacular generates, I think it makes vernacular so interesting, and so that vernacular students, if students are told that the narratives of vernacular, or if our students are made aware of narratives of vernacular, I think students will be more interested. And I am seeing that in SPA Bhopal since I'm conducting with vernacular students. I'm not taking them to the urban, traditional or urban vernacular. I talk purely core vernacular, which exists in our rural areas or villages or whatever, kasbas, whatever you want to say that. So what I feel one of my basic reasons for that is that whatever we talk about vernacular, we always talk about how vernacular elements are coming into contemporary practice, isn't it? But my own major focus is that vernacular has given in terms of its architectural language, or it has given architects a language that they can innovate on, create on, add on, and do buildings which are what Anand called as neo-vernacular, or you can call it as contemporary vernacular. My argument is very different. My argument is that, okay, we in urban areas, we are now basically living in a modern world with modern amenities and all. And also there was one question in the by Anand, that in this modern era with internet and all facilities, the rural community is also getting exposed to these things. So my philosophy or my understanding of vernacular is that how as an architect we can take something from the urban as an architect to vernacular without disturbing the essence of that place. True innovation and vernacular will be then. It has to go to the masses that are residing. More than 60% of our population is residing in vernacular settlements. So how, as an architect, we, as an academician, I believe that how architects can contribute a lot, but they are contributing to more of a vernacular language that is contemporary, and but it is only restricting to certain places, like a certain kind of projects like resorts and all, which have a very high-end resorts I have seen, which are basically designed on the lines of contemporary vernacular. So my understanding of vernacular and my conclusions for vernacular is that how I can motivate my students to innovate within that vernacular language, so that it benefits the community there. So this is my perception of vernacular, and I would like to share my presentation. My talk is more on kind of a sustainability vernacular and how phenomenology it's very interesting. The narrative that generates around vernacular makes it interesting for students to understand vernacular. Vernacular is not just about the built form. It is about the stories behind it. It is about the communities behind it. So it is about the cultural and ritualistic practices behind it. Vernacular is all about that. It is kind of an inclusive in nature. So let me share my presentation. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes. So please make it on slideshow mode.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it. Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you look at the first statement, which I see, if you look at the first statement, it says, I am a fan of Charles Correa. I think he's my role model. And I have looked at him as a great inspiration. So what he talks about is that in the century, we as an architect depend more on the mechanical engineers to provide light. I call it as mechanical ventilation and lighting and all. But as a country, we cannot afford to squander upon our resources. And here he says that vernacular architecture can teach us. So because vernacular architecture, basically it is not just about the built form plan, it's about the section also. So if you look at Charles Correa's practice, you will always find some essence of vernacular in his projects, whether it will be Bhavarat Bhavan in Bhopal, where I live, whether it is any office building, Jawahar Kala Kendra in Jaipur, whichever projects you see, you will see that certain hidden essence in his work. So, the slide is changing.
No, sir,
Okay.
we
Now
are
it
still
is.
on Charles Correa's slide.
So, Paul Oliver is one of the persons who basically compiled vernacular encyclopedia, or you can say. So, what vernacular is all about? It's basically about dwellings and all other buildings of the people. It is related to the environmental context and the available resources. In environmental context and available resources, you can understand. Vernacular architecture is basically, if you look at, they are customarily owner or community built. I will say vernacular buildings are expressions that have been seen as a collective architectural wisdom of the community or the culture. It's not an individualistic, it's a collective wisdom. And if you look at that, so it is basically built by the community utilizing traditional technologies, and you will see that it is built to meet the specific needs of the people, accommodating the values, economies, and way of life of the culture that produce them. So you will see that vernacular architecture is something embedded in the culture. It is embedded in the climate and the economies that produce it. So if you look at sustainability also, sustainability is basically about these three major, I will say, the pillars of sustainability are equity is one of the pillars, economy is one of the pillars, and environment is one of the pillars. So you will see that vernacular architecture basically is embedded in all these three. And that makes vernacular very interesting. So what I see while discussing vernacular, what I see that from a phenomenological perspective, I see you will find vernacular architecture as a kind of a reflection of a culture. You will find in vernacular architecture reflection of culture also within the built form. You will find how local material is used, how so vernacular traditions have been adapting and renegotiating its values through a mindful change that has strengthened the viewpoint of its appropriateness. So a lot of authors or researchers have argued on it. Oliver is arguing
So
on
sorry
it.
to interrupt you in between. Slides are not moving.
No, I'm coming. I'm just, the slides will change. So,
Okay, sir.
so if you will see that, like Paul Oliver, Marcel Wellinga, you will talk of Mozon, you will talk of Scholz, you will talk of Rodowsky. Rodowsky says that there is much of to learn from architecture before it became an expert's domain. And that is all vernacular. And I don't see in my history books, we don't teach vernacular to that extent. When we look into your academic program, vernacular is not given that space which it requires. And that is the reason why we are seeing vernacular architecture in our country. It is our country has so much of diversity in vernacular architecture. It's amazing. It's totally mind-boggling. And if you look, because it's a language of the people, and the people, if you look at India as a country with a very diverse cultural, I'll say multicultural environment, you will find the culture in the south and the east, in the west, in the north, very different. And you'll find these culture dictate architecture, the spatial logic and the social order. The social order of such cultures basically dictates the spatial logic, and the spatial logic further dictates the architectural elements. So you will see vernacular as such an interesting architecture. It has been given many names: primitive, aboriginal, indigenous, ancestral, traditional, focal, rural, ethnic, informal. So there have been many names given to vernacular architecture, and 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 you will find that primitive. This is primitive, they say it, and I really don't like this term primitive. Aboriginal I like it because it comes out of the soil. From it is indigenous, local technologies, local material. Ancestral, it has come through basically generation to generation. Traditional, folk. So you will find many terms for aboriginal, basically vernacular architecture. Architecture, this vernacular architecture, the language of architecture in vernacular is basically grounded in the local context. And the local context, you will see, are basically the climate is there, sociological context is there, functional context is there. Functional context.
Slide is opening.
Huh? Slide is not moving. Hello?
No,
Yes,
sir, we are still on the Charles Correa slide.
Oh, what should I do? Okay. Let me go to.
please restart the presentation. I think that is going to help. You can start sharing it again.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay. Are you seeing it now? Hello?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
we see the presentation. Please put it on the slide mode, sir. The
Actually,
presentation.
might be I'm having problem because I'm maximizing it. So can you see the present slide?
Yes, sir.
Can I show it like this?
Okay, sir.
Okay. So if you see vernacular, it is basically grounded in the local context. And local context, if you look at the climatic, which is environmental, the sociological, and the ritualistic, which is more of a functional, and the aesthetical and the economic. Functional is economical also. So it is basically about the needs of a given society. Whether you look at the settlement pattern, whether you look at individual units, if you look at the build forms, if you look at the build forms, it is basically about the needs. I remember the Gandhian philosophy on environmentalism. What Mahatma Gandhi said, that this earth has enough to provide for our needs, but not for our greeds. So you will see that how our urban settlements are growing, and they have become energy guzzling centers. Whereas vernacular, if you look at vernacular, is still it basically architecture is based on the needs of a given society. And so if you look at vernacular architecture, you will see it's seemingly simple, can say almost low tech, derived from the local use of materials and building techniques, and is completely related to the local environment. So local craftsmanship here plays a major role, because the local craftsmanship knows about the climate, it knows about the human comfort levels, and it knows about the materials which exist in the surroundings. So they know the skillful use of local materials and turn these raw materials into building elements. And one of the reasons why they have structural limitations is that. And they here also they understand how to optimally use the materials in the building. So if you look at vernacular architecture, this was just a brief of vernacular architecture. And vernacular architecture I'm talking about not in the urban area. I'm talking about in the rural area. So if you look at this slide, you will find the diversity of vernacular architecture in India. We start from north. If we look at Dhaji Diwari, we look at Koti Banal, we look at Bhutia in Sikkim, we look at the Katkuni technique, which is being used in the Himalayan regions, which are seismic. We look at in the south, when we go to the south, we look at Arapura and Naluketu. And we look at when we go to the west part, Rajasthan, we can see in Gujarat, we can see Bhunga, we see in Odisha, we see, you see the diversity of vernacular architecture in India. It is immense. It is immense. And understanding that, and if there is one thing common in this is the way they choose materials and the way they place their dwelling units in a given context. So if you, I'm just showing you a few photographs which you will see. Uppermost photograph in the left was a photograph taken by me. This is a house which was in a village in Amethi, where you see mud walls and some level of brickwork also you can see in there, and the roof. You will find in mud, you will find so much of in kind of how they use the same material, soil, in various ways and create their dwelling units. You will find it in Iran. You will find multi-storied vernacular dwelling units in Iran, and because they suit that they suit that context. Then this you will see. If you look at the upper photograph, you can you ever believe that this is a spectator stand of a football stadium? This is the spectator stand of football stadium of Thimphu, Bhutan. I love Thimphu because they have given a lot of importance to their vernacular and traditional knowledge system, and their urban guidelines of Thimphu are based on that. So the traditionality of that city can be simply seen, and it has its own character. Not like other cities. If you look at Bombay, or if you look at Delhi, Gurgaon, or Mumbai, New Mumbai, you see that global image. Here I see that local image. And the photograph below is some photographs which I have taken from Chanderi, how they construct. So now I'll basically my talk starts now. Is that vernacular is a sustainable concept in holistic terms, because as per Oliver, he says that vernacular architecture is highest form of sustainable building, as it uses the most accessible building material and the widest use of technologies. Paul Oliver talks about vernacular architecture like that, and I basically very well agree with Paul Oliver on that. Because if you look at the components of sustainability, how they have been looked into, all the three components, and whether it is environmental, social, or economical, you will see that how they are deeply embedded in architecture. So sustainability, you can see the models of sustainability, you can see the interdependence model, you can see the Manu Singh's model. So, and the model sustainability concept as a whole by Cut. So, I see vernacular architecture, if I have to place in these three models, I will place it in the third model, where the environment is the umbrella within which equity and economy is also conceptualized. So I see vernacular architecture as a holistic concept when we talk about sustainability. I'll give you a very good example of that because I'll give you an example. My case study is on tribe in Arunachal Pradesh, and I'll tell you what vernacular architecture actually means. So it's a vernacular is basically, as per the slide, is embedded concept of sustainability. And if we talk about the climate plays a major role in the development of vernacular architecture of any region. The macroclimate changes the built form and its immediate context. Hence, the variation in settlement morphology is seen. So if you look at the variation in settlement morphology, it's basically depends on the macroclimate of that. Rain, wind, heat, cold, geographical location like hills, sea coast, desert play a major role in the evolution of the built form and the material use. So as the geographical location changes, the materials which are locally available, there is a variation in that. And for example, I'll talk about mud. Why mud as a material is not used in all the regions? Because it's available everywhere, whether it is central India, western, eastern, or. But there is a reason, because there is a particular quality of mud which can be used. And there is another alternative material available where the soil is not to that level that it can be used as a building material. For example, stone is used alternatively in that. Like Chanderi stone is used. So you will find that climate plays a major role. Then you will see that the social factor, the lifestyle of the people also plays a major role, especially in vernacular architecture. It is also in urban, but in urban, the lifestyle of people in urban and the lifestyle of people in rural areas, you can see the difference in that. Because when we talk about the social order in rural areas, it's very different from the urban areas. And the social order that dictates the spatial logic of a given place basically starts making that narrative of phenomenology. So if you look at whether at a settlement level or whether at a dwelling level also you will find that some level of social order is there. Because in villages, I remember my paternal house, the dwelling unit for male was separate from the dwelling unit from the female, जिसको लखनऊ में जनान खाना बोलते हैं, और उसमें मेल वाले पार्ट को दालान बोलते हैं in UP and northern part. So you will find within a dwelling unit also that kind of social order exists. And that kind of social order was having a impact on the day-to-day lives of the people living in that social order. And that dictated the spatial logic of that place. And the spatial logic was also defined by the culture and traditions and the societal behavior that dictated the development of the built form. So the cultural practice and traditional practices which were ritualistic in nature, rituals were evolved through generations, and which were religious in nature, which were also non-religious in nature. So these kind of practices also dictated the built form as well as to the settlement pattern. Then in the lifestyle, how food was prepared, how it was eaten, how festivals and marriages were celebrated, how cultural influences that were intangible in nature affected the built form as well as the settlement. And so we see a lot of, if you look at India as a country, you will find immense diversity in the culture also. If you go to Northeast, the culture is very different. If you go to West, the culture is very different. If you come to the South and North, you compare the cultures, it's a wonderful, healthy mix of such a variety of culture that I have not seen any other country. I have not visited China because this is because we are societies which have been here for much before the Western societies in terms of developed societies. Asian societies have been much older than Western societies. And that is why our vernacular architecture is so immense. So, and there is a need to deeply understand it. So when we talk about the economical part of vernacular, so the economical part is of the built form, if you know, locally available materials, without any secondary processing, gets converted into a component of building that has dictated the character of the building form. The available building material have dictated the innovation in the construction technique. And the construction techniques is dictated by the locally available material coupled by the climatic factors that contributed to the evolution of the character of vernacular architecture of that particular place. So using the local material, we have local material, it is basically the impact on the environment is very less, and it might be also because the transportation of a given material was not possible because of the non-availability of the mediums of transport. There are limited mediums of transport, so the material use might be because of that also, might be a limitation. For example, people living in vernacular settlements didn't have the resources. For example, for Taj Mahal, the stone came from Makrana to Agra. So that might be the limitation. So if you look at vernacular architecture, I'm presenting one of my very interesting case studies, which I did about the Vanchu tribe in Arunachal Pradesh. You know, this tribe was a headhunting tribe, and a very fierce headhunting tribe. But during the colonial period, the headhunting came down. You might be understanding what is headhunting. Actually, if you are a village, a village or a tribe tries to conquer another tribe, and if the winning tribe, the head of the tribe that loses is taken off and is brought as a memento by the winning tribe, and also in this tribe I am talking about. So if you see, this was a tribe which was animist before, but now if you look at this tribe, around 97% of, I will say I'd say more than 97% have converted to Christianity. So there has been a cultural shift, but I didn't find in their cultural shift only. I will show you a photograph where I only found that shift in the built form. If you look at the slide, you will see top right. He was the king of the that particular settlement. And below was his wife, and there's another person who was one of the elders of that, and you will find the normal people on the other side. So this particular tribe lives in the Tirap region of Arunachal Pradesh, and they are headhunters and are scattered over 36 villages and divided into 11 jans. I will explain to you what jan is. They wear a very colorful attire and have guns and spears as their main weapons. Vanchus, through their religious practices, were animist, and a very small proportion of their population was Hindu. But now Christianity is the main religion, followed. Almost all the Vanchus have taken to Christianity. And the change of religion has little impact on the social order of the community. That is one thing. The social order of the community has not changed with the change of religion. Due to the effort of the government and the machinery, now headhunting has been restricted to animal hunting. So if you look at So if you look, my case study was of Senua village, located at a distance of around 6 kilometers from Longdi, and it is situated in the hill, on the hilltop, and Senua Noksha is part of the same village, which
You
is
have 20.
hello.
So please continue. I think somebody by mistake would have switched on.
Okay. So if you look at Senua Noksha, it was part of the same settlement, but it was beside the river. So I studied these two settlements, and the character, if you look at this character, these are the photographs of that village. And if you look at the settlement pattern of settlement and the land management system that governs the method and practices of livelihood in a way without overpowering or imposing itself, and they establish the character in such a way that it doesn't overpower the natural environment, the environment which is within that context. So what I see in this kind of a case study, that it is basically a kind of architecture that complements the natural environment. And what we see today in our urban areas, we do not complement, but we impose ourselves on the natural environment. Examples are of flooding in Chennai. You can see flooding in most of the cities in the country. Why it is? Because the natural terrains and the natural environment has not been respected. And in vernacular architecture, you see it very deeply rooted in the settlement evolution as well as the dwelling unit. So if you look at the, let me tell you the way they use their land. So they have kind of a 6 different kind of lands. They allocate the land use pattern, the like we have in urban areas, like residential, commercial and all. They have 6 different categories. Zim is the agricultural land for paddy cultivation. Chawat are the traditional vegetable gardens with their homes. Kap are the kitchen gardens in the jhum fields. and plantation area for bamboo and palm leaves, which basically is a kind of a sustainable harvesting system, because these two are the materials which are used in their dwelling units. So there is another kind of plantation area for them, which is kind of a sustainable harvesting system for them. Thumb, which are the clan jungles, and finally the settlement area where they build their houses. So you will find they use the land around them in these 6 different ways. And comparatively, they select the gradual slope to settle down and construct their dwelling units accordingly. The streets are along the contours, more or less linear in nature, does not have any steep slope. So they perfectly choose the location in such a way that it is easier for the settlement to grow also. So dwelling units are placed along the street across the contours. You can see the streets are along the contours, whereas the dwelling units are across the contours in a random manner. And that depending upon the land parcel available at that location. And then the streets as well as the dwelling units have minimal impact and tend to merge with the natural surrounding without overpowering it, imposing itself, they don't impose itself from on the local context. If you look at the social structure, now I have already talked about the environmental, how they manage their land. I will come to their dwelling units also. So the social structure, what they have main 3 classes. The Wangam class is there, the son of the king. Then is Wangpan. There are 2 major classes. One is the higher and the lower. The Wangpan are the commoners. And in Wangam also, Wangam is the king or the chief, and Wangxia is called as the queen. So you see that that this kind of social hierarchy is already started building up, and the commoners are called Wangpans. And there is if you have a child from a Wangam father and a Wangpan mother, that means a child from the king and a commoner, which means the marriages used to take place. So that particular was called as Wangsa, and the children from Wangsa father and Wangpan mother were called Wangsus. So you see that kind of the social order building up, and so interesting social order. And if you look at the spatial order as generated because of that social order, spatial order as generated by the hierarchical positioning within the society, the dwelling units of Wangpan, Wangsa, Wangsu, and Wangpan, Wangam, Wangsa, Wangsu, and Wangpan along the slope within the Jong reflected upon the spatial manifestation of that social order. At the entrance of the village, ritualistic structure called Pankha are constructed to prevent evil forces from coming in. Wangam occupy the highest point of the geographical location, and then were the Wangsa and Wangsus. The dwelling unit of Wangpan were located at the lower points of the slope. So the king or the Wangam was located at the highest and the more secure place, so that the enemy has to cross the entire settlement to reach it. And Wangchus believe that the place that has been struck by lightning is the abode for evil spirits, and so perform ritual to keep the spirits away. So you will find these kind of ritualistic places also there. The place at the bank of the river, which basically is a ceremonial place for Shalom Shom, a stone or place where river god is basically worshipped. Then if you look at within that social order, if you look at a Morong or a Pa, because villages are multi-clan in nature, and I talked about Jan. So Jan is kind of a collection of jongs. Jongs means various smaller set. Senua, Noksha, and Senua village. These will be two Jans within a village. So Senua is a village, whereas Senua, Noksha is a Jan, and Senua is a Jan. So if you look at that, it is owned by under the guidance of the chief. Each jong has its own Pa. Pa is a Morong and a spirit. Basically, Pa is a place which is for it's kind of a boys' dormitory. So, and a spirit. Why this Pa was made? Because every Jan has a Pa. Every jong has a Pa. So within a village, if you have two jongs, there is spirit of competition exists among the jongs. Among each other. So number of Pa may increase depending on the settlement site and population. Senua was having 3 because the Senua village was large, so there were two parts of Senua. So Pa is like a sacred institution attended by every male of the tribe who is admitted in childhood and continues to be the member of the Pa till death. So it was basically a male dominated kind of a dormitory where women were not allowed. And Pa used to take the responsibility of raising those children, for example, a school, a gurukul, or you can say like that, teaching them discipline, skills like hunting, self-defense, farming, cooking, weaving, carving, everything. So you will see that Pa was like a gurukul for them. And admission into the Pa was done by offering spices, crop, meat, and lumber for burning in a considerably large amount to the Pa itself. So basically, that was kind of an admission fee to them, which was in a form of spices and crop and meat and all. So you will see this. This also had a very important placement within the settlement pattern. Because these were the people at the time of any disaster or any kind of a enemy attack. The people of the boys in the Pa used to take the lead and used to try to defend themselves. So if you look at Pa, in case what I said, in case of emergencies, the member of Pa maintained the order and peace in the society in matters where the king's probe was not deemed necessary. So smaller kind of a discipline in that village was basically maintained by Pa. And Pa is a structure very similar to the house itself with a front. If you look at the structure of the Pa, in the photograph, you are seeing the skeletons of the animals. Those skeletons were the basically souvenirs from hunting animals. They used to cut the head and they used to keep it as a souvenir. So Pa has a huge kham, which is a musical instrument, which I will show you, which it also used to be. At the bottom, you will see that kham, which is one of the largest musical instruments in the world, this particular tribe has. It is also the final resting place for enemy skulls, which used to be during the headhunting time. Since most of the Wanchus have taken up Christianity as their faith, and enemy skulls have been buried. So only the skulls of animals they hunted are remaining as a display in the park. So the social order generated through the clan system within the village, the system of Pa and its role in positioning of the male in the socio-cultural context, if you see at framework of the community, helps in understanding the spirit of the place. Okay, understanding the spirit of the place. So, hey, just a minute. I think the slide. Now let us talk about we talked about the social order, the festivities, spaces of festivities, ceremonies and rituals that are part of the spatial configuration of the village or the community become an important component of the spatial order, which helps in developing a sense of place through its identity as a ceremonial place. This photograph is basically of a ceremonial space. So they have this function of Ozel, which is a kind of a sowing season. The harvesting celebration is Uriya. So you see the communities are basically sowing season and harvesting season, which you see in our culture also. If you look at Deepavali or Dashera, if you look at Holi, these are related to sowing and harvesting and all. So if you look at all members used to gather in this open place, participate and enjoy in different types of sports activity like bow and arrow, shooting of guns. After the end of these events, the king announced the start of the season of cultivation, after which everyone goes to their respective farming land with liquor and meat to worship the land and celebrate and start the sowing season. The natural forces and gifts of nature honored and are prayed to, and similar festivities take place as in case of Husserl. So first festivities like Panjum, Pangurum, Sachwan and Chaksai are few of them which also used to take place. So if you look at the festivities, they also had a role in that spatial logic, that this place was not within the settlement but slightly outside the settlement. Then the art of tattoo, which is quite prevalent in this community, you will say all tattoos and motifs have been taken from nature. So if you look at the men mark their limbs and face to signify success of their headhunt. So if you look at the men, you will see that how much head hunting they have done. Now it is basically animal hunting. So their tattoo also basically. Sorry, Abhi Bhaku. So if you look at the tattoos, they also had a symbolic. They were also of a symbolic in nature. If you look at the woman, also the female received their first tattoo at the age of 18, and that signified that she has become a woman and is eligible for marriage. Then she used to first tattoo at the age of 18, and it used to be visible. Then she used to get a tattoo at the age of 21 on the thigh. And then she used to get another tattoo at the when she used to get married, and that used to be on the neck, which showed that she is married now. So such kind of symbolic I will say art. I remember that I was in one of the tribal villages in MP also, and on the built form I saw certain symbols which I was not able to understand. So there was at one house there was a single symbol, at one there were 3 symbols. So I asked the person, what does this symbol mean? So that person gave me a very interesting answer, that this symbol means that there is a unmarried girl in this house which is now for the age of marriage. So such kind of symbolism, which gives you a kind of a narrative, is very much prevalent in vernacular architecture, and it makes vernacular dwelling units so interesting with stories behind it. And if you look at also, I'll tell you one more thing, that this is a Vanchu house. This the basic material which is used in a Vanchu house is bamboo timber. And if you look at the plan, you see the sacred entrance. Then part of the house is on land and part of the house is on stilts. So if you look at that partition in between, Towards the right, it was basically on the stilts, and towards the left, where you see the thumb there, and the kham. Thumb is the paddy pounding instrument, and kham is their musical instrument, which I had showed you in Pa. So this, if you see, these are in two parts, and the stilt and on the ground. So if you look at the Sanko Thangu, it is basically the sacred pillar which was the first. जैसे हम अपने यहाँ करते हैं ना, भूमि पूजन करते हैं और फिर नींव पूजन करते हैं, वैसे ही this was Sako, which was the sacred pillar, and it was erected. It was the first thing to be erected, and you will find here the kitchen is there at the corner, and the floor is of bamboo mat on the basically stilted side. Only the kitchen part is also in the left side, which you can see that near the side entrance, and is also in the right wading thong के पास में जो है. So you will find that this house is such an interesting, and I will tell you that these houses were different for different levels in the society, and how you could recognize these houses as this belongs to Wangham, or it belongs to Wangpa, or it is Wangsu or something. Basically the bamboo matting pattern or the style of bamboo matting within the dwelling unit used to give that reflection that this person belongs to this kind of hierarchy in the society. So the bamboo matting on the walls used to tell you that this is either Wangham or whether Wangpa. So that kind of, you can see the interesting narrative which these dwelling units generate. So these are the sections of the dwelling units. Actually, these are the documentations which my students do. Actually, Bhopal, I am very lucky to be in Bhopal and running this vernacular studio, because we have Indira Gandhi Manav Sangrahalaya, where we have life-size prototypes basically dismantled from that region, transported to Bhopal, and re-erected in Bhopal in the museum. So I am able to tell my students, and there are around 42 to 45 dwelling units brought from all over the country. So it's a huge resource for my vernacular studio, for students to understand what actual vernacular is all about. So if this is you can see the matting styles, and you can see the construction details and the art and craft done by Wanchus. These are a few photographs which you can see. You can see the stilted part. You can see the part where the dwelling unit is on the land. So you can see how they have respected the. I didn't see in this entire village any I will say retaining wall. So so you can see that they perfectly respect the terrain. They find the land parcel for their dwelling units accordingly, and then they built on it. And if you look at the house of Wanchu, it's a sacred place for rituals. The naming ceremony of a is performed by the oldest man in the family. So what kind of rituals do take place in the house? So if you see a boy, the naming ceremony takes place at the age of 2 or 3. The boy, although small, has to take 3 rounds of the house with a small basket with little light items hung on his back. Again, at the age of 12 to 15, another ritual is performed which enables the boy to become the member of the Murong or Pa. So the ritual that happens in Pa also happens at the house, and he starts wearing langoti, the lion cloth, from that time. In case of a death rituals, the body of the deceased is kept on a bamboo platform with the personal belonging. In case of Wangham, the king, it is called Ruk. Ruk it. It's built near the house, but whereas the Ruk of Wangpan, the cobbler is built near the burial ground. So the body is not buried, but the skull is buried. Now this practice has changed since Christianity has come in. The body was not buried, but the skull was buried. After 15-20 days of the family goes to the rook and cleans the skull and keep it in a clay pot and then take it to the burial ground and buries it. So you see how Vanchu settlement, how Vanchu dwelling unit, how the social order dictates the spatial logic, and that spatial logic is basically, that social order is reflected in the spatial logic of the settlements as well as the dwelling units. So the conclusion, what I see is that the sensitivity towards the natural environment, what I saw in this settlement is reflected through the minimal retaining wall and the natural slope, at least modified to the very least. The spatial order as generated by the hierarchical positioning of the dwelling units of Wangam, Wangsa, Wangsu, and Wangpan along the slopes, with the jongs reflected upon the spatial manifestation of the social order. The clusterization of the village through jongs and a social order henceforth is able to establish the spatial and the social orientation of the place that is very specific to the community generating this particular sense of place. The pa in every jong is able to signify the role of the space in order the social order of the given jong and the village. Being only a male bastion also tries to create a sense of place for male. The village festivals like Ozel, Oria, Panjum, Pangrum, and Sachuan, and Chaksai give spaces non-residential in nature a sense of identity as ceremonial spaces and make them an important component of spatial order. The tangible position and the intangible inclusion through ceremonies and with the village dwelling unit makes them a cultural spaces. These spaces, whether residential or non-residential in nature, become places of special attachment. So you see how the social, the environmental, and is getting included in the entire spatial pattern as well as the dwelling unit. So if you the picture I was talking about in the beginning, that now most of the community is Christian. The only thing I saw that changed in the dwelling unit was this: just having a picture of Jesus and on the sacred pillar. So if you look at the identity of each place was defined not only by its physical character, but it had various associations in the form of ritual, memories, ownership, representation, and ornamentation involved. Now, with Christianity as a main religion, the rituals, and especially the rituals at the time of death, have changed. The rituals of the sowing season and harvesting season have not changed significantly, because previously there used to be a sacrificial ceremony in these rituals also. So the rituals which now has drastically decreased. The rituals within the house of various occasions, like naming ceremony, ceremony of age of 2 to 5 and 12 to 15, are now also waning. So with Christianity, but this is a kind of a cultural shift we are seeing. The architecture of the dwelling unit has not seen any significant change as the community still practices the ecological process. So what I mean to say that the dwelling unit has not changed in a sense because the contextuality of that particular dwelling unit is so strong that they don't feel like changing it. Only what I was seeing was that the modern amenities, they have included modern amenities into their houses, but that needs to be very well architecturally integrated with the vernacular essence of it, which they have not been able to do it. As an architect, we need to understand that, and we need to help them. The community still follows the land management practice, so the environmental behavior of the communities has not changed. They still follow the same land use pattern, and this the same. The vernacular construction is primarily a community exercise in space building, and it is not kind of an occupation. So it's a kind of a community. If a house is to be built, the community helps the person of the dwelling unit to build the house. So this was my presentation. If you I will basically stop here. Okay, so what I see as my understanding of vernacular architecture is vernacular architecture is so immense, and it's so filled with this kind of social or cultural narrative, that it makes it a perfect example to study and learn from it. I will end up with my statement as the difference between a house and a home. These two terms are very different. Home is just like what I see as vernacular, where a house is what I see as a flat in an urban area, which doesn't have that kind of embeddedness of the socio-cultural and environmental underpinning. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, I am open to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for a very engaging presentation, awareing all of us with the phenomenology which makes vernacular very interesting subject, of being aware of the narratives of existing vernacular studies. And you have presented it very well in terms of good examples, case examples, showing how the social order dictated the build form through the clan and the lifestyle of the people, and through the rituals also. Sir, my one question is that religious prescriptions, religious sentiments can also bring some kind of anti-climatic solutions also. So we do take Tulsi in our house, or we have people Barkat, but we do have this, that these bring negativity in if we keep it in our houses, and they are oxygen producing plants. So what is your take on this?
No, if you look at the vernacular houses and the vernacular settlements, they have understood their natural vegetation very well. And you know, Bargat or people and all, you say it basically oxygen producing. You don't want to have it in a house, but you want to have it in a community.
Yeah.
At a
Even
settlement
sir,
level.
small, just symbolic way also, they don't want to have it in their houses. All the Indians, even in a small symbolic way, sir. Like we do have the bonsai and all.
They have a different function.
Yeah.
They have because if you look at people and Bargat and all, in North India also, in certain part of India also, there is a ritualistic relevance to it. वो धागा बांधती है ना बरगद. That's a community activity, not a
community activity. Yeah.
That's a community activity, not a dwelling activity. So you will find that these vegetations, if they are done by the community, are so well placed at a settlement level or at an individual level. Tulsi at an individual dwelling unit level, and it is also placed in a given place. It is placed at a kind of a Brahmastan center part of the courtyard.
Yes.
Or just at the entrance of the house. Right? So everything has its meaning. Every element of that house or a settlement pattern has a meaning behind it and has a story behind it. And
Yes.
that is wonderful about vernacular architecture.
Yes, sir, definitely, sir. Sir, we have one more questions from architect Umal. Now that kids go to school and have hospitals, how has this new genre of buildings incorporated in the settlements?
In the settlements,
Yeah.
you are trying to ask me a question which is hypothetical in nature. You are talking about urban settlements and all. So urban settlements is purely basically dictated by the one of the aspects of sustainable development, that is economy. Other two aspects are never kept in mind when we are talking about urban settlements and its expansion. We have total disregard for the environment in which we are living, and the repercussions of that we are already facing. We are facing urban heat islands. We are facing ecological imbalance in urban areas. That's why we are facing floods. They have become very popular in cities. Lot of examples you can see. Chennai is one of the very good example, and recently Bangalore and Lucknow. So until and unless in urban areas, it's you must have seen in the previous presentation. In urban areas, we talked about everyday, vernacular, and traditional. So in urban areas, it is restricted to that only. And yes, to a certain extent, local material is used. You will see symbolism in that. You will see craftsmanship in that. But that craftsmanship and symbolism is slightly higher in order as compared to vernacular. That is more refined, I will see. I was comparing, I did a study in Chanderi. I did the settlement and dwelling vernacular study in Chanderi, and what I found was the vernacular of Chanderi, the Havelis, the dwelling units of weavers in Chanderi, the dwelling units of the Havelis in Chanderi, and then the palace in Chanderi. The same motive was seen in that, but in a more refined form in Haveli and much more refined form in the palace. So the start is from vernacular, but the refinement takes at the upper level. So regarding your question, I have already answered that in urban areas, when the kids go to school and hospitals, if we have to bring vernacular architecture into it, then we have to nullify the economic, and we have to basically look at the environment and the social aspect of architecture much more predominantly as compared to economic.
She has written, architect Umal has again written, I meant to ask, don't they have schools and hospitals at all in their settlements?
Oh, they have this in Wangshu, they have their own, you will say every village used to have a Vaidya or kind of a, if you go back, I'll take you a little back to history before the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, our entire production process was decentralized. Every village was an economy in itself, and the surplus from that village used to go for trading into the cities. Cities were the trading posts. They were not the manufacturing hubs. They were either administrative capitals or trading posts. If you look at history, the whole scenario changed after the Industrial Revolution. So after the Industrial Revolution, the city was basically centered around the production units. If we look example of Manchester, after Industrial Revolution, Manchester became the textile hub, and this textile manufacturing plants were there and surrounded by the housings for the laborers and all who were working in those plants. So the entire concept of urbanization changed after Industrial Revolution. Whereas if you look at pre-industrial revolution, every village was an economy in itself. They had their natural healer in them. So with now what I saw in my case studies, that the village didn't have a hospital, but the nearest, I will say, which was Longding, which was around 2 to 3 kilometers from that place, was having a hospital, primary health center, and all the modern facilities which it had. And it had the school also. And children from this village also used to go to school in Longding. So it was there, but they were located 3 kilometers away, not within the village.
So there's a important comment made by you, which I had I have been thinking about, which is on where you say that local materials without secondary processing, when used in construction make a vernacular. So I just wanted to, I wanted you to talk a little more on this, on secondary processing. How do I actually get into that line of thought with material engagement in vernacular,
When I talked about that, we as urban dwellers have to take something to the dwelling units. As an architect, it is not just our responsibility to design for exclusives in urban areas. It is also our responsibility to look at the population, more than 60% population. I'm presently working on a research project where I'm talking about vernacular typologies where we have chosen seismic zones at the moment. And what we are doing, that if you look at the local material which we use, timber is one of the major local material which is used as a structural element. And what we are trying to do, we have taken 3 typologies, vernacular typologies. We have taken Koti Banal, we have taken Bhutia, and we have taken this Bhunga in Gujarat. And we are trying to replace timber by steel, structural steel, without disturbing the essence of that particular typology. And because we have taken seismic zone, because this particular project will test we will be then, after designing it, we'll be erecting a prototype 1:1 in the seismic lab in NIT Jaipur, and we'll be testing it seismically. So replacing it by timber by structural steel, and at the moment you will see in PME Housing Grameen, government is making a huge push to propagate PME in Grameen rural areas also. But what is happening in rural areas is they are basically trying to develop rural areas with concrete and all. That is basically destroying the cultural landscape of that place. Rather than doing that, if we try to retain the essence of that particular typology by I will say replacing certain components, because structural component is one of the most important components in that. So if we are able to use a modern material, I'll come to the secondary processing. When you are using a structural steel without disturbing the essence of that typology, and without disturbing the cultural or the socio-cultural phenomenology or narrative of that place, I think you will be able to contribute to that. And we have started with seismic zones because we will be testing it seismically. And then we will then we'll go to another research project. Where we'll be taking up coastal zones where we will target dwelling units which are prone to cyclones and heavy wind flow. Regarding secondary processing, I meant that you know, when a primary material is brought to the site, it is basically, for example, timber. Timber is seasoned and then it is made into a different kind of a kind of उसको काटा जाता है, उसका दरवाजे बनाए जाते हैं, ये सब किया जाता है. But if you look at vernacular housing, I'm not talking about traditional, I'm talking about vernacular. If you look at my examples, you will find that they use the tool themselves. They use the local material, just took it from your backyard, cut into size, and prepared the required component of the building. I showed you one of the slides where they have doors, where they have walls which are matting. They did it themselves. Only is by they didn't process it in any kind of a mechanical or other way. So if you look at secondary processing, I see it has to go through some kind of industrial process or some kind of a chemical process or whatever it is.
Got it, sir. Thank you. I'll discuss this over with you again, sir. Thank you. Any more questions coming up for sir?
I believe we are done with the questions for the session.
There is one question I see. Would brick be a form of local material with secondary processing? I think this question is from Sapna Shivakumar.
Yes, sir. There's question about the brick.
So if you look at brick, if you look at vernacular housing, brick came later before adobe, and you will see rammed earth walls of mud came. And if you look at brick previously was sun-baked. So they gave us form to the brick, which was rectangular in nature, and it was basically kind of a shaping the mud. So if you look at adobe, it was shaping of mud into lumps and then putting it as a wall. If you look at rammed earth walls, which can be quite a lot seen in the Himalayan region, which was rammed earth walls. I have seen from Himachal to Bhutan and Northeast. So they had their own character, and they were very seismically resistant building. When I had gone to Bhutan for one of my projects, research projects, I saw that the buildings which were made of mud were intact, whereas the buildings which were made of concrete, they had collapsed. So, so you will see that as a brick, they were able to bake the bricks also at a local level. It was not an industrialized process. Now it has become an industrialized process. They were this secondary process was involved, but they were able to do it at a local level by themselves. Secondary process means not done by you. You use your skills, you take the local material, you process it either by cutting or shaping it or by giving it more robustness and build it from it.
Correct, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. We are getting a lot of compliments for the session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
One more question from Reshma Praveen.
Hello.
Yes.
Is that
Yes,
a
sir.
question? Okay.
Can I talk to you, sir?
Yes, yes.
Sir, I live in the region where in the south of India and north of Karnataka, where we have stone as a very predominant material, as a natural material, where the quarries are there.
Yes.
It is into the belt where we call it as Shabad stone, and from there it is lasting up till Tandur. So we found that the vernacular settlements which has happened in this region is in the period of Bahmani period.
Yes.
That is the rulers period.
You in that region, laterite is also used at a certain level in Karnataka.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, laterite is also
Granite
used,
is
and
there.
even
Yes.
yeah, laterite is also there, but predominantly this stone as a material, it has been used as a major components, like for the say structural components. For the
Yes.
roofing also it has been used. For the roofing, it is covered as a slate.
Your
Yeah.
voice is not clear. Hello.
It is covered as a slate, sir. Hello, hello.
Anand, can you?
Yeah, Reshmaji, your voice is breaking a little. You are saying that it's used for roofing. That bit is
Yeah,
clear.
it is now, sir. Now it is clear. I'm audible.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
better.
Yeah. It is used for a roofing material also.
Yes. Yes.
It is a major,
Yes, it is used. It is used.
element.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as we were very much in a confused state, like is it to be called as a vernacular or it is a traditional kind of housing? That you have made it very much clear regarding
There
it
are.
has to be as a vernacular
Yeah.
because it is using a locally available material to the nearby places.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
since the decade, what I have seen, sir, from my childhood and now what I'm seeing, RCC has dominated on this kind of
Yes.
material, and even the vernacular setups which were there earlier, now it has totally demolished and it is in a ruin condition. So we are trying to do our best, but still people need to be educated. Who all own it, they need to be educated. Like they have to restore their kind of the vernacular heritage which they have conserved from their ancestors should be conserved in a better way. Rather, they are just demolishing it and going it with a new kind of construction.
Okay. My answer to this is we are not, as an architect, we are not giving them alternative. The problem is there. If they get an alternative which is not concrete, I think they will try to build something within their capacity. We are not, as an architect, it is our responsibility to give them alternatives. My research project in seismic zone is giving them alternative, because in PMA, what we will be doing, will be giving them the structural steel, which is a prefabricated structure, transported to their place, and the structural system will be erected, and the rest of it will be done by them using the local material. So the essence is intact. I've seen the roof is of stone. You can see in many regions in Rajasthan also, you will see this kind of roofing system in Chanderi. In one of my slides, you could see that. So roofing is in stone, but why it is basically now, I will say vanishing from vanishing, is because we have not given them proper alternatives to it. Because now people with modern living, they need much, because in vernacular, the structural limitations were there. So you will find that the spans were less in truly vernacular. Spans were less,
Yes.
where stone slabs were used. So evolution took place, and they were, when it came to traditional system, the stone beams were replaced by steel sections. Steel sections, which you can see in a number of buildings. So we need to give them alternatives. And until and unless we give them alternatives which are available to them,
True, sir. That's
we
very
will
true.
not be able to change the scenario. People will go for concrete. I've seen in this village also, saw one structure which was coming up in concrete in Vanchu, but it was then stopped by the local people that no, this doesn't go well.
Thank you so much, sir. So thank you so much for giving us your valuable time. So Dr. Sanjeev Singh shared with us how vernacular architecture is deeply embedded in culture, economy, and environment of the community, just like sustainable development. He shared a very interesting case study of headhunting tribe of Arunachal Pradesh, and we got a glimpse of how the social order dictates the spatial logic in their community. He has also drawn our attention to the local materials without secondary processing for true vernacular to flourish. Thank you, Sanjeev sir. Thank you once again.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for all
much.
your valuable time. People will definitely reach out to you for more details.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. During the earlier in the day, we also saw Dr. Bharat Daya, who shared in-depth study of the Mongolian city, the coldest capital in the world with minus 40 degree of temperature. He gave us insights on the community-led urban upgrading and redevelopment and shared the intriguing ways of preservation of vernacular waterscapes in the river delta of Thailand. And our first session, Professor Manish Chalana discussed the theoretical underpinnings of vernacular and preservation through works of various eminent vernacular scholars. He appealed to the practicing architects to embrace the everyday vernacular and link it to equity and inclusion. He also re-emphasized to teach students to contemporize the vernacular in meaningful ways. So in the end, I would like to thank each one of you for being with us today. And just a gentle reminder that attendance is compulsory and mandatory for all the sessions. And on the last day of the FDP, there will be an assessment test of 60 MCQs. Tomorrow, we will start our session at 1 p.m. with architect Dean De Cruz, followed by Professor Hina Zia's talk. So please join us 5 minutes prior to the session. See you all tomorrow afternoon. Have a great evening, everybody.
They have a query in the chat box regarding the presentations. So it is to bring into your notice that the links will be shared by Council of Architecture. So after all the sessions will be done, the links will be shared with you.
Yes, the recording links will be shared with everybody. So rest assured, you will get all the recordings. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.